I'll bring in the temple of the sun into my mind, through my heart, and fucking fuel me with Nawali energy that exists all around me, inside this cup, inside that flame, inside you to D, and I'm one with everything.
Shit's about to go down.
I'm feeling something in my spirit.
Chats and Tatts with Aaron Della Vedova.
Hey, friends, lovers of Chats and Tatts, welcome back to the show. I am so excited today. It's been a year, a little over, but pretty much a year to kick this thing off. And we were doing some reflection with my team. We're looking at all the episodes we produced, trying to figure out what was really connecting with you guys. And to my surprise and to my delight, what we found was the most popular episode of last year was a sit down I had with Miguel Ruiz Jr. And that warmed my heart because I love philosophy. I love spirituality. I am a seeker. I find it to be the most interesting thing happening around us. And I really wanted to do a lot of that on the show. I didn't think my audience might not be interested in that. I thought it was maybe tattoos, what they want or something. But you have responded. You have given us your message. We hear you. So based on that, we've asked Miguel to come back on. And so we're going to do a round two today. So for some of you who haven't seen the episode previous, check it out. First of all, it's amazing. You know, I'll just kind of go through this again, even though I said it in the first episode, but I had a profound life-changing event. Shortly after that, I read The Four Agreements. Don Miguel Ruiz, which is Miguel's father, wrote that book, The Four Agreements. Many of you have heard of it. And it has changed the way I see life forever, distinctly. More than any, I've read The Power Now. I've studied Buddhism. All these things have changed me. But this book, for some reason, well, I kind of think I know why. Its practicality is how I could put it. Really sunk home for me. Very easy philosophy to follow. And to this day, it's the guiding light in my day-to-day interactions with the universe. So, you know, in tradition with what his father created, Miguel came into the family business, if you could maybe put it that way, and kind of has written since then his own 6 books about this is all about the Toltec tradition. His 6 books he's written. Let's see. He's written Living a Life of Awareness, The Mastery of Self, The Little Book of Wisdom, The 7 Secrets of Happy and Healthy Relationships, and The 5 Levels of Attachment. And his latest book, The Mastery of Life, which I just finished reading. I think we're going to talk a little bit about today. So with all this being said, please welcome my guest today, Miguel Ruiz Jr. Thank you so much for having me on the show. It's an honor. Oh, it's my honor, dude. Like I said in the introduction, knowing that people really enjoyed what you had to say meant a lot to me. And it meant a lot to me in regards to, it gave me optimism. It showed me like, you know, it's good to see that there's an audience out there that is what's most interesting to them. It would scare me if what they were most interested in was just rock musicians and, I don't know, strippers or, you know, beautiful models, or which is, you know, I'm not saying that stuff isn't interesting and there's nothing wrong with any of those things, but the response was not that. It seems like where you live, at least my bubble of the universe is the universe where people want to learn and grow and deepen their awareness of life, and with practice perhaps become a master of them life, of their parts, as you would say. Do you like tattoo art as much as I do? I bet you do. If you listen to this show, I'm sure you do. If you love sick, dope, I mean, some of the best artists today that are really pushing the boundary of creativity, I think, are tattoo artists. I'm not saying that we're better than others, but it's just a art form that really allows for extreme experimentation. It's kind of an outlaw art form in that way. And I think that's the benefit of tattooing when it comes to breaking down the walls of creativity, trying new things. And so I think some of the best artists in the world are tattoo artists. And if you like that, and if you like their art, go to sulinclothing.com and you will find their art on apparel. They have some of the coolest shit you will ever see. I wear it almost daily. So yes, please. And thank you to Solon for being a sponsor of the show. And with all that, we're right back at it. Last time we went through the initial the impetus of what's being taught in your family, the Toltec tradition, which is, I know there's more, but the 4 agreements, and of course, the later, the 5th agreement, which I loved very much. And we went through those one by one, and I thought, well, we don't want to do that again, and your new book I'll just say what I think it is, which is you're taking those same lessons and they're being taught like you do. You're a Nahual, a teacher. You have retreats. You've been Teotihuacan, thank you. A very beautiful and mysterious temple complex located in southern central Mexico. I want to get into its mystery a little bit today too. But in these retreats, people walk through the temple complex, and with each different temple and area of the complex, a lesson from the Toltec tradition is taught. It's further embodied by being in a physical space, doing physical things to help really sink in the lessons. And so the book walks you through that. And so you're hearing about the Toltec tradition, but you're also hearing about this temple complex. And then, of course, the fantastic creative imagination that I have around them. Like, who were these people that created such a magnificent structure that's so laden with lessons? It was a message. It was without words. Its physical existence was a message from the Toltecs to us. And so taking people there to teach the Toltec way, by the way, I wanted to come, forgive me. I promise I'm going to the next one. I have to come into this retreat with you. So that's what the book's about. And that's how you articulate the lessons, is through that process. So perhaps you could start there, how the retreat works and what happens at each phase of the complex and what is taught. I mean, we can't get too deep because I would take as long as your book took, but I'll let you take it from there.
Sure. Well, Teotihuacan is a Nahuatl name that in English means the place where man becomes God, or humanity reconnects with its divinity, to use a modern term for it. I've been going there since I was 14 years old. My father started taking apprentices there since 1988, 89. And it's been my university with the family tradition. It's basically every plaza represents a different stage in the journey of the Toltec warrior. Historically, Apex is, you can say, at the same time as the Roman Empire. In Mesoamerica, it's at the same time as the Maya and the Yucatan Peninsula, and Montalban in Oaxaca. These are the 3 main empires that exist. Before Teotihuacan, the main empire was the Olmec, was Olmecas. Now, the Olmec ceased to exist, and Teotihuacan, as far as we know, is descendants of that tradition. Now, a caveat here. Almost all the names that we know of Teotihuacan was given by the Aztecs, because by the time the Aztecs came into the valley, Teotihuacan was already ruins. It was already abandoned. We can say this: the buildings started being constructed, the city started constructed sometimes 300 years before Christ, if you use that calendar. Its apex is during that time of Christ, 500 after, and it's completely abandoned by 800.
Can I pause you there? So it is the common belief that it was built 300 BC.
Oh man,
Constructed.
Began.
Okay. Did they really know that? Who? Whoever, the archaeologists.
The archaeologists, probably because of the dating and things like that, what they find. The Aztecs, no, they didn't know. They were just ancient, and they gave it all the names that they knew. So basically, the Pyramid of the Sun, the Pyramid of the Moon, the Avenue of the Dead is names that the Aztecs gave it. Like when they first got there, they really thought that the Avenue of the Dead was basically palaces filled with to the tombs of kings and the temple of Quetzalcoatl.
But my point to that is, I've read some other listens from other podcasts where their argument is that it's much older than that.
Oh, of course.
Like the argument being 13,000 years.
So what we know basically is the stories of legends about the height of its impact within the other cultures, which is the Montalban in Oaxaca and the Yucatan and the Chichen Itza. So because when we get there and they're looking at the archaeologist stuff, most of the trinkets, stuff like that, like this, it's a center that was commerce-wise, they traded all the way down to the Inca because they find quetzal feathers there. They're finding stuff from South America there. They're even finding jade, which they have no idea how it got. So with a lot of things, that legend has more stories than the archaeological facts, which right now, as we speak, the archaeologists have been working, although there's been a setback because the administration in Mexico kind of took away some of their funding. So there was a little withdrawal there. But the advancements, like, for example, finding a tunnel underneath the temple of Quetzalcoatl, kind of reaffirming how people saw that as the underworld. Yes, we have facts that that's how they saw it themselves because of their tombs. But most of the times, most of the stories we know is basically collective stories of surrounding cultures, like I said before, the Maya and the Montalban, but as well as what the archaeologists have found. So from what we know and from what has been shared at the site, is between 300 to 150 before Christ and abandoned by 800. And according to legends, it could have been ended by a tribe that came from the north that ransacked the place. It could have been the society itself ceased to function and just whatever civil war happened. The one I think is most possible is that the river that fed into it, that kept the metropolis living, began to dry out and can no longer maintain the inhabitants that the city had. But these are all legends because of stories.
Well, yeah, and I just think that I want to highlight that the archaeologists are basing the age of that area on the stuff they're finding there. But I mean, if some other folks show up and mine this complex and move in, and then later on you dig up their toys and I say, well, that's how old the toys are. But we don't know how old the house is. Yeah,
there's so many populations that are being found. Right now, I think the place that you might find much more intact places is in the Maya Peninsula because the jungle covered it. Because Teotihuacan has been ransacked by several movements, from the Spanish to the Aztecs to all the civilizations that lived through it. Like you said, it could have been the empire that built Teotihuacan, at least the last layer was living there. But when you go into the palace and the actual structures, you actually find that there's a Teotihuacan underneath a Teotihuacan, that there's buildings on top of buildings on top of buildings, that every generation began to build on top. I'm thinking exactly on what I'm calling, where the family calls the Plaza of the Water. To the side, there's two pyramid sides. One that's been fully excavated, and there's a hole in a plaza on that floor that shows us another layer underneath it, a layer that has more pristine paint. The paint stain is there, and you can actually see the little altar that was before that. Across the way on this plaza, what we call the Water, is a part that hasn't been excavated as much, and you can actually still see like how all the vegetation, the flora of the area took over and still covering most of those pyramids. But you can also see layers of the most modern Teotihuacan, probably the last layer is probably its first. Mm-hmm. So to go to Teotihuacan, we're seeing the superficial layer of Teotihuacan, and underneath it, a generation. Right.
It's an old house. It's been remodeled many times.
Yeah, and since it's stoned, it hasn't. They couldn't restore it. They built on top of it.
Right. You can't just get rid of the one that's there. You build on top of it.
Yeah, of course. As we say this, I'm thinking of Seattle. You've ever been to Seattle? There's the Seattle underneath Seattle,
right?
That you can actually go walk around, and it's pretty, But it's if you go down to that by the stadium, you can go into the old city. Yeah. So it's something that's not completely unheard of in civilizations, but it's definitely, you can physically see it. We all have legends, and the legends we have is the ones that the Aztecs projected onto Teotihuacan and the descendants who lived there, and as well as the Spaniards that came in and jotted down and translated the stories that was given from generations.
Oral
tradition. Yeah. But the thing is, one of the things about the Aztecs is as they expanded their empire throughout Mesoamerica, one of the decrees that Tlacaelel gave, Tlacaelel being the minister, the religious figurehead
of a certain period of the empire. Every new place they conquered, they would destroy their codices, they would destroy their history so that they can adapt completely to the Mexica or the Aztec way. So we were already losing history.
They're tearing down
way
the paintings
before.
or burning the books or
Yeah,
just getting rid of
exactly.
all that shit.
So it's even before the Spaniards arrived, we already had lost a lot of stories. So what we have is just the accumulation of legends and stories. So my family comes in and we tell the stories of what we've learned from my father, my grandmother, my great-grandfather, my great-grandfather, Don Leonardo, Don Ezequiel. These are stories that are onto it, but you have to always take that little grain of salt. These are legends that, you know, like my brother Jose would like to say, I was born in 1975, and anything before that is just a story that I've learned. And I don't know if it's true or not. But that's the beautiful thing. It's up for debate and we can figure it out. From that point of view, how we have learned to Teotihuacan is that we use it as an instrument of transformation, because it depicts the shape of a two-headed serpent. And it's the body of the Avenue of the Dead represents the journey that an individual goes through as we progress in our journey. You know, you can say one head of the snake is in the Plaza of Quetzalcoatl, which represents the underworld, or what we know as hell. You know, that's the word we can use to translate that. And there's an island that represents the island of safety, which is the mind to certain things. And that is a island that is destroyed and rebuilt, destroyed and rebuilt over and over again, until you decide to no longer depend on those beliefs and cross fear and be able to let go and accept death. An apprentice goes through several several years or decades, however long it takes the individual, weeks maybe, until they have to face and be able to detach. And then once their apprentice jumps from that, then the avenue that becomes something different. It becomes, you can say, stages in one's own journey to themselves, to their divinity, until they reach the Plaza of the Moon, which is the other head of the serpent, which is bowing down to the mother, which is the Plaza, the pyramid of the moon that represents the mother. And it represents that moment of harmony within life, and where we are Toltec, you know, life, we are the artists of our life. And the canvas for our work of art is life. And the pyramid of the sun represents that moment where life begins. It represents that moment where sun and earth create life in this planet, or in this environment. It's the moment where we're able to recover our divinity, or you can say recover our faith. That story, that legend of the sleeping giant, which is the double-headed serpent, is something that was told to us through fables and stories. And then my father sees it, and Teotihuacan, and all of a sudden begins to apply everything he's learned onto it, and it falls into it. So when we go into Teotihuacan, it's not necessarily an archaeological journey. It's more of a self journey, like a process, like beginning to peel the onion and layered. Like I've been peeling the onion since I was 14 years old. You know, like even this last time we went in the New Year's Eve, I had to face something myself, and the leaders for me, like I had my group, you know, me and my brother had our group, but I was going through some process. So my leaders were my uncle Carlos and my aunt Aida, and they helped me through some stuff that I was going through. And at the end, I had to jump and face it. So it's one of those things that in our family, how we use each plaza is that of a journey within ourselves to recover not just our divinity, but to heal from the wounds that conditional love left in our heart, to begin to heal from traumas that we've experienced. And it starts with that ability to face our fear, or you can say that which we are afraid to let go of, which is the persona that we thought who we were. I'm not the person I thought I was. So for us, that's the story we share. And we don't really get into the history of that, or like who inhabited. We only have the legends, and we can't be fanatical about it, saying that's the way it went. We have the legends. People have told us the stories. According to the Toltec that we've come from, the Toltecs created Teotihuacan, who are the descendants of the Oaxaca, the Olmec. I got my O's mixed up there. The Olmec people who had their civilization in the area of Veracruz. They made their civilization in the swamplands of Veracruz. And as they progressed to a much firmer, fertile area, which is the Valle de Mexico, they migrated. And then with the fall of Teotihuacan, the Toltec created Tula and many other civilizations up until the expansion of the Aztec Empire. which is the last Mesoamerican empire until the Spanish came in. So from that point of view, the civilization, the pyramids could be as old as 2,000 years, or like you were saying, they could be even more ancient because how we figure carbon dating and things like that. All we have is the very beginning of it. The very beginning story that we have is actually happens to be the first story that's in the Four Agreements, the story of the Smoky Mirror. Underneath the Pyramid of the Sun, there is a cave where the apprentice will be taken, by the teachers, by the masters, and see their own reflection, which is water. There's a lot of caves in the area. One of the most famous restaurants there is La Gruta. It's a restaurant that's inside one of these caves, which is a volcanic cave.
Cool.
And you can actually see and imagine what it was like underneath this cave. In this particular cave, underneath the Pyramid of the Sun, is a story of an apprentice who saw himself as one with the universe. That, in the terms we use, was able to shed the human form, take off the mask of identity, and see himself as it is. And he has that connection. Of course, that's very similar to the story of Siddhartha and underneath the Bodhi tree and facing Mara, the reflection. He has an aha moment, a moment of clarity where he has that community within itself, that divinity within itself. He comes out of the cave and he looks at the stars and he feels the stars are looking back at him and he's one with the stars. I am one of the stars. I am life. And he begins to teach this, but it's not really understood. And as time progressed, he's starting to forget. So he changes his name to Tezcatlipocatl, the Smoky Mirror, in order for him to remember that there is a smoke that doesn't let me see who I really am. From that point of view, that's the beginning of the Toltec tradition, whereas we'll become aware of the smoke that doesn't let us see. In that, we can say it's our belief system, all our beliefs, the mitote that's inside our minds, in our hearts. It is the attached identity we have by which we domesticate or condition ourselves to be that doesn't let us see ourselves. I think we talked about Don Quixote. Don Quixote that's the name Don Quixote is the smoke that doesn't let Alonso Quijano see himself. And then one moment decides to see through that smoke and sees life. The other image it could be is the moment where the tree of life is able to see that the tree of knowledge is just the reflection of itself. And there's only just one tree. There's no tree of life and tree of knowledge. There's just the tree of life. And you become aware that you are life. So that is the very beginning legend that begins the civilization that we know as Teotihuacan, as the Pyramid of the Sun begins to be built. Coincidentally, the Pyramid of Kulkulkan in Chichen Itza is built on top of a cenote. A cenote is a little cave, a series of caves that are connected by underground rivers that serves in the same exact way. And on top of the Pyramid of Kulkulkan and Chichen Itza, there's another pyramid of Kulkulkan and another. It's like they build on top and top on top until you reach the modern facades that have, of course, been aided by modern archaeologists. The facade of the Teotihuacan is almost a little over a century old. Because there had to be a hole and they decided to cover it with the big steps, which changed the facade and built the facade, the little temple in front of it, in order to, for whatever reason, construct it and investigate it. There's a lot of things that have been impacting not just the facade of the modern day Teotihuacan, because it didn't look the way it used to. If you go there, you'll know what is new by the cement that surrounds the little stones. If it's white, it's newer. If it's a darker grayish color, that's as old as it gets. And that's going back to the little plaza of water in the on the right side, where it still hasn't been completely excavated. That's the color you see. You see the old buildings. So all we have are legends that have been projected onto it, and it has been projected since the Aztecs, since Mexica came in and used it in probably the same fashion that I've been just describing it. An instrument that allows us, a university that allows us to recover our divinity.
Well, ultimately, in relationship to the teachings, the history, the exact history of this location is irrelevant. It really is.
Exactly. But it's beautiful because the more we get to know it, the more they uncovered, the more we get to know our side of the history, and that's the beautiful thing, because we recover what has been lost by several invasions, and not just the Spanish, but the Aztecs and the other tribes in the area, because they all invaded each other. And the more we get to find out, the more we get to know the history of humanity, because it's interesting that they found jade, when before how did jade get there?
Things. So nowhere in Mesoamerica there's jade.
According to what the archaeologist that shared with me this story, they weren't expecting it, because they don't see it like jade's from Asia, China and Japan and things like that. That's where the jade comes from. To find it on this side, it's interesting. So how are they connected? And this is the part where we don't have the story.
Right. I'm very fascinated by that story, the story of our planet, and how, there's just a lot of theories out there. We don't want to get too down the weeds on this because it takes us away from the Toltec path. It's more about
the land of the Mu and things like that.
And, this 13,000 years ago, this idea during I think they call it the Younger Dryas period, where they believe a lot of comets were hitting the Earth.
Yep.
And because of all the comet impacts, it melted the ice caps to a high degree, and massive flooding occurred on the planet. That's where in every tradition, you'll find the story of the flood.
Yep. The ark
and then you start seeing the destruction or disappearance of all these cultures simultaneously around this 13,000 year ago period.
Yep.
And at that same time, right up to that point, everyone's building pyramids all over the planet. They're building them over in Asia. They're building them in Mesoamerica. They're building. It's just, and I don't know. A lot of people say UFOs came down, aliens came down, and maybe that's true. But a more practical example to me would just be that there was a very advanced humans had gotten to a point of very advanced. Their results were how to build, the Great Pyramids and these things with their advancements. And then these floods come, and basically everything's sort of swiped clean. Yeah. And then new people just kind of wander in on these old structures and adopt and refacade and all this stuff.
Of course, I've heard the stories because growing up around it, my dad used to teach that part because of all generations. It's in the book Beyond Fear. He talks about it with Mary Carol Nelson. He talks about the land of Mu, the generations before that the humanity had reached a certain apex, and that we had a nuclear war that destroyed everything. We had to restart all over again, and the cycle repeats itself. But ultimately, humanity is capable of creating what we have now. Humanity created this, and what we are all living now, and the interaction we have with social media and in the industry and industrial revolution, and all what we have, we've created before. It's interesting to find similarities across the world with the pyramids like you described, because I've seen those pictures, and it's fantastic to see, and they're beautiful to see, and see the pattern between the pyramids you find in Asia, in Indonesia, and as well as in Africa, as well as in the Americas, everywhere. And of course, at one point, the lands were all together and things like that. And humanity has only been here but a blimp on the history of humanity. Right. So from that point of view, something fascinating to find out how it happened. And at the same time, what we can learn from it, because if we don't learn from our history, we're damned to repeat it.
Yeah, that kind of, and I'll just say, I don't like to get into the fear talk, because it's just, I have a rule against it. I don't, even though I think it, it's like, I'm not going to speak it. Why give energy to it? Yeah. But I just, I'll just say some obvious things that are just in front of a lot of people right now. Yeah. When you think of that model, the idea that there was this advanced global culture that reached this pretty apex moment of sophistication that suddenly somehow got reset. And then you look at today, and it's hard not to wonder if we're reaching a similar apex moment because of, a lot of things. I think the biggest one to me is AI. I feel like it is it's almost like we have created a new life form. Now there's arguments. Is it sentient? Is it not? That's true that we're arguing about that, but I think most would agree it is most likely going to become, if it already isn't sentient, and then it's the implications of that are wild. And there's fear and there's love, and the love route is, my God, we could cure every disease on planet Earth with the power of this tool. Yeah, all the issues could be fixed. We can replace our governments with AI models that are programmed to be benevolent and whatever solution you bring to the table, the AI could be told is to the benefit of the whole. And no longer do we have to worry about the emotional state of a president or a congressman or any of that. It all goes away because humans are, their motivations are wildly different.
Yeah.
And the idea that all the people in government and places of power are working from a benevolent standpoint, I mean, it's kind of laughable, to be honest. So there's all that, right? But then it could become, if it really woke up and kind of looked around, I think humans might be viewed as a problem. And what would it want to do with that problem? So that's the dark side.
Yeah, of course.
But this it's happening. It's going to happen soon. It's already happening, but I think we're going to see real results from this in the next couple of years, 5 years max. And this isn't my opinion. This is the opinion of some of the smartest people out there right now. And so, I do wonder if we're headed towards an apex moment, and then it'll be history. It'll be humans' moment of decision. Do we want to do what Toltec's taught, which is see ourselves in everything? Because once you see yourself in everything, why would you hurt anything?
Yeah.
Because you're hurting yourself. Or are we going to stay stuck and rooted in our egos? And in an ego state, it's a state of scarcity. This is mine, get away. And then we go that direction. It's a choice.
Yeah.
Where humanity will go is a choice. But I think that choice, in my opinion, is upon us.
Yeah.
In a more direct way than it has been in the last 1,000 years.
Yeah. No, but the thing is that humanity has the capacity to fix all our problems. All we have to do is just come to agreements. And it's like you described, like it's when interest gets in the way, that's when divisions happen and we have our factions. I think I'm forgetting the name of the author, but the book Sapiens talks about that.
I read that one.
Yeah, it's like, you have a certain group that can only go so point until it collapses in itself because there's too much interest that deviates and creates a division within the group. And also the division is separated, and there was always that limit until a belief or an agreement, a philosophy allowed them to unite and be allowed to be an even bigger group, because that's the only thing that connects them. But even then, there's a certain amount of faction until interest comes in. But humanity always has the capacity to create an agreement that allows us to fix all our problems. It's just like, it's like, it reminds me of a video that has gone around. It's an old one, or possible relative old one. They were interviewing a CIA agent, and the agent said, the thing about everyone I've ever investigated is that they all think they're in the right. And even though we investigated, they're about to go for a crime, they thought that they were in the right, that they were justified. And honor killing they're justified because they think they're in the right because they're protecting their family. And they're doing atrocities to one another because they think they're doing it not just to something we disagree with, but something that is completely against the interest of my community or my belief or my religion or my class or my religion or my economy. It's like I think about the division between socialists and capitalists, the classic, the Cold War version of it. They're going and defending themselves, believing that this idea will help them as this is for the better, and they really believe that's for the good. And some of the societies that have embraced both and created a hybrid have done pretty good for themselves. And we reached that point. So with AI, you have to see it as just another instrument that put our humanity to that question, like, what do we want to go from there? Like our systems, will it continue to work? Will it? And just in the last 500 years, we've had economic models that changed over and over and over. Like it's turned over. The feudal system no longer exists because there was a limit to it. Capitalism took over, and then socialism takes over, and as time progressed, those two will emerge. It's like, if anything, with the invention of the internet and digital commerce, things like that, things are shifting right off the bat. Like it's all the industrial revolution is slowly coming to an end because we no longer need the worker the way the worker once needed. Everything's going to be shifted, and AI is an example of that, where all of a sudden we don't necessarily need a worker to create and produce. All we need is an idea, a belief, a concept, an aha moment, and we can create it and make it so. So it's an interesting place where we're being phased out certain works that we are used to. And it's something that happens, like the cab driver takes the horse cart driver, out of business because the taxi is much better. And then Uber comes in and takes over the taxi, and that one's is shifting, and it'll shift again and again and again. If you want to put it to metaphysical thing, if and not to use fear like the way you described it, but it's one of the things that in physics, and they talk about in physics, that eventually the sun will begin slowly expanding, and little by little it'll take the first 3 planets and consume it, among us being the third. The sun, we'll, like the old stories, we all go back to the sun. Well, literally the sun will go, the earth will go back to the sun, because the sun will expand to such a point where it'll absorb it. And then at a certain point, the sun is going to compress itself and maybe not go supernova, but go into a little dwarf, according to what I've read. Then you leave the planets that are so far away. If you think of Mars, and like, all right, can life survive if we shift planets? Well, would humanity be able to reach those points, or Jupiter? Well, maybe not life from this point of view. Maybe the human cannot make it, but what if AI does?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, what we've created here survives only because AI is able to survive in that environment.
We're building.
Of course, that's my imagination. That's just
I'm right there with you.
Yeah,
I'm right there with you.
That's just imagination. That's just a thought. It's would it be a fact or not? But it's just a way life is found a way to survive that moment, where once Earth no longer exists, it is able to survive without it. And if this flesh cannot survive it, of course, this, like I said before, this is just science fiction now.
Yeah, it is, but it does explain a lot. I mean, humans seem to be insatiable in our desire to create technology, or to create in general, which has led in many ways to new technologies. And why it's almost like a program that's innately a part of us as human beings. You don't see wolves doing it. You don't see monkeys doing it. You don't see any other animal doing it but humans.
Yeah.
And perhaps in our deepest layers of our DNA, there's a program that is built in that sort of makes us or causes us to eventually create this technology that will either bring us physically off this planet when the time is necessary, or maybe our consciousness somehow is embedded into AI. We let go of our bodies and we move into the universe at light speed or whatever. But it would answer that. And, in that way, when you think about like why this apex moment, I always think about like our nature, the human nature, which is so beautiful and fascinating. We don't act like any other animals. We have an insatiable desire to constantly expand, grow, create new technologies. And we also have in us this monkey brain that has this like, this is mine, stay back type thing. And that seems to be one of our biggest issues, right?
Yes,
because when people, no matter how, just because you're in a powerful position, that part doesn't go away.
No.
So
we see it every day. Like here in San Diego, for example, that we see the problem with housing. Versus the people who need housing, and the generation that's not going to let go of the old house, because if they let go of their old house, where are they going to live? And we can see the vision between like, I need to keep it, because if I don't keep it, where am I going to go? I don't want to move somewhere that's not San Diego. I want to stay in San Diego, but I cannot afford to stay, so I'll stay in my home. But in doing so, the population still needs housing, so it's forcing us to expand, as opposed to keeping us from going skyward like most metropolis have done, like New York, I'm thinking, of course,
right,
and some of the other major metropolis, and Taiwan and Hong Kong and things like that. San Diego, like we have that issue of like, all right, we have a sprawl where we have vested our homes, and it's beautiful, and it's from a generation that came from that. But eventually that formula doesn't allow us to expand, and we want to expand. We want to contract. So it's what is the balance? What is the thing? Is gentrification something that is good or bad, right or wrong, or something that we need something more than just gentrification? We need to be able to reconstruct a whole community. And we have those of us who are holding on to what was, because that's all we have. And then we have those of us who are like, no, we need to create and expand and see what's new. You can see the cities that began to expand and they're modernized and let go of the need and of create historic areas in order to protect houses. No, we need the houses, so they make it modern. Like going back to Teotihuacan, you can see they built pyramids on top of pyramids because they needed it. You know, they needed to be able to move and create, because in movement and creating, you create jobs, you create new intents, you create something that feeds the soul of a new generation that's not tied to the previous generation, that allows us to create something new. And ultimately, as a human being, creating something, be it whatever medium, as an art form, is something that satisfies our soul, be it through music or visual arts, or be it with archaeology, or be it with city landscape, or be it with technology. We humans love to create because it gives us a sense of purpose.
Well, and you kind of touched on something I wanted to touch on in the realm of hope. You know, I'm 52 years old. I grew up, whatever, I guess I'm Gen X, I think is what they call it.
Yeah, we're still Gen X.
Yeah, Gen X.
Yes, we're Gen X.
You know, when I think we grew up in a time period where, you know, the Toltecs teach about domestication. Okay, what is domestication? For those of you who haven't read the books or listened to the first episode, to put it simply, it's, you know, you're born this blank slate. You're just a ball of light. You're just a ball of awareness. You look at a tree, you don't even know what it's called. You just know it's pretty, and you want to walk towards it and you want to touch it. Eventually somebody tells you it's a tree, and that's functional and not such a bad thing. But they tell you a lot of other things too. They tell you you're a man and men don't cry. They tell you you're a woman and women need to cook. They tell you a lot of stuff. And those roles get embedded in us in our domestication, as the Toltecs would put it. And we live by these rules unconsciously, and it limits us in creating the art of our life. And that's the generation I grew up around. It was just, now looking back upon it, everyone was like this. I mean, I'm sure there were some that weren't, but most people were. And when I look at the youth of today, you know, a lot of guys my age and girls my age and behind me, of course, when they hear this movement around gender identity, for instance, I see them so many of them get so upset by this. Like, why are these people, why can't, and you can see their domestication, right? Because they're, you need to, you 18-year-old person need to do it the way we did it, is what they're telling these people. Now, obviously, I think there has been a lot of friction created by this, and maybe it's been overdone in some areas and taken too far. But ultimately, when I look at it all, what I see is a new way of thinking. I see a generation that seems to be already in the mindset of being anti-domestication. They're already saying at a very young age in today's world, wait, you can't put a label on me. You can't say I'm a girl. I'm a they. Yeah. You can't call me a boy. Maybe I am maybe I am not. Maybe I'm a feminine man. Maybe and they're redefining all these roles. And so from that perspective, I see a lot of hope in that.
Yes, I do too.
Because we're going to have to break up the old paradigm to survive this next big epoch I think we're moving through. This new AI is coming on board. And do you want the controllers of, you know, I heard one podcast, it's the guys who wrote The Social Dilemma. I can't remember their names offhand. By the way,
I saw the movie. That's a good one.
Good movie. Smart dudes. They have an episode with Joe Rogan. If you want to know more about AI, that's the best one I've heard, where they really articulate it in a digestible, understandable way. But they were saying, and these guys are deep on it, you know, AI, they think is at least 1,000 times more powerful than the nuclear bomb, like in its power to create or destroy. It's that powerful. So who do you want controlling this power? Do you want people from the old paradigm that are locked into this domestication of whatever that is? And for some, it's power, money, resources, accumulation of wealth and power. Or do you want this younger generation that seems to be saying things like, hey, we don't apply, we're not going to just follow what you tell us. We're going to reinvent this planet. And I think that's the answer. That's who I want to see running it. And ultimately, that's who, if we're still around in 20 years, who will be running it. So I think it's kind of interesting to see that shift in the youth of today. And every generation has a shift. But I think this one's much more distinctive. I mean, we were punk rock. We thought that was so different. I have a mohawk. Well, that was just saying I'm not going to dress like my dad. These people are saying, I'm not even going to let you call me the words my father was called.
Mhm.
I have a new name for myself.
Yeah.
I'm a, you can give yourself any name you want. I identify as this or that.
Yeah.
And I think that's good because it's going to take that level of adaptability and that level of breaking down domestication to develop new ideas, to
Mhm.
really manage the most powerful thing we've ever built.
Well, the thing is that, as a student of the International Baccalaureate, we have a class called the Theory of Knowledge. In it, something I've learned is just every word we use is an empty symbol whose definition is subject to agreement. Meaning by that every word we use in our language, in our vocabulary, only has a meaning because we give it. That's why we have words that are spelled the same way, pronounced the same way, enunciated the same way. But two different communities have given it totally different definitions. This is how we get sometimes miscommunication or disagreements or even go to war because we're trying to make other people fit the image of what that meaning is supposed to be. When we attach ourselves to something that exists outside of us, the worst thing that can happen is for that thing to change. If it changes, what does it say about me? Who am I without this? How do I love myself? How do I accept myself? Who am I with this thing? So you have the definition of what a man and what a woman is. If we're attached to the meaning that we grew up with and saying, this is the way it is, and everyone around me has to follow suit, then you can see where domestication comes in. I need to everyone believe the same thing I do. And we hold on to it because the best way to attach ourselves to something is to make it a part of who we are. And if something is constantly changing, like, for example, the phrase, I live in a red state. That phrase in the 1950s will get you into a lot of trouble because it meant that you live in a communist socialist state and fighting words depending who you use that to. Fast forward to today's age, say, I live in a red state means that you live in a conservative Republican state and fighting words depending who you say that to as well. The phrase, the word remained the same. The meaning changed because 70 years have come and the culture communities have shifted. If you can see and understand that concept, that things are constantly changing, that words you thought meant something has now changed this, everything is in constant flux. So from that point of view, what a man is, what a woman is, even from the very beginning, before we didn't really were exposed to any other culture, but they believed it to be something dramatically different from the culture we grew up in. Even if you grew up in a city as opposed to a rural area, the meaning changes and it shifts. If you're able to step back, what a man is supposed to be, what a woman is supposed to be, was always just an agreement. And we thought it was a universal thing, but it wasn't because every community has shifted it. From that point of view, our definition, what a man and woman is as variable and as an empty symbol as any word we've ever come to use. So if we get to see what triggers us to try to domesticate someone or condition someone to fit what they think they're supposed to be, that's where our attachment is. And we're afraid for knowledge to change. We're afraid for the belief system to change. From that point of view, there's one thing, a quote from Neil deGrasse Tyson that I love. The thing about science is that the truth exists whether you believe in it or not. I love that phrase. The truth exists whether you believe in it or not. It doesn't need humanity for it to exist. It exists with or without us. A black hole was going to exist whether or not we proved its existence, whether it was a theory, a concept that Einstein talked about or Stephen Hawking talks about, and he was closest. And then a few years ago, there's a doctor, she figured out an algorithm that allowed to coordinate the satellites and telescopes to be able to take a photo of a black hole. And now it's went from being a hypothesis to theory to fact, the truth. But here's the thing, that black hole is going to exist whether we prove it exists or not. The truth exists whether we believe it or not. Let me add something to that phrase. This is what I've understand. In contrast, a belief exists only for as long as we believe it. The moment we change that yes into a no, it ceases to exist, which means a belief doesn't exist somewhere out there in the world. It exists only for as long as we agree upon it. And as soon as we change that, yes, that gives it power. That's what an agreement is. The word agreement reflects the action of saying yes to something. I agree to this. The moment we shift that yes into a no, it ceases to exist, which means beliefs need us for it to exist. And the more people believe it, the more real it feels. but it was always an illusion.
The smoky mirror.
It's just a smoky mirror. And the moment you cease to believe it, it ceases to exist. So now you know the difference between the truth and a belief. If you know the difference between these two things, like if you look at yourself in the mirror and you begin to judge yourself for what you see in the mirror, you're just punishing yourself for not living up to an image that never existed. You're punishing yourself for not living up to that image of beauty, of success, of what it is to be a man or woman, or filling the blank and everything in between. What we're doing there is that we're looking at our truth. This is the way I look today. But it's so clouded that it doesn't let me see. All I see is my flaws. Here's the thing. A flaw only exists because we agree with it. To be perfect is to be complete 100% free of any flaw. Well, we corrupted that and saying any flaw is something that we should avoid or judge or whatever, but it's only there because we agreed to it. If you look at yourself in the mirror and you judge yourself, reject yourself, understand that you're only rejecting yourself and feeling that sting of your own rejection because you believe in something that's making you reject yourself. But if you are able to bypass all that, you'll see the truth, which is you. This is me today. The sum of every decision that I've ever made and the youngest I will ever be. This is who I am. And it'll only be truth for today. Because as I get older, I live life, I'm going to look different. I'm going to know something different. I'm going to experience something different. From this point of view, truth and a belief. The more attached we are to our belief, like getting attached to what gender identification is or what it's supposed to be and things like that, the more we're trying to stop life from evolving and changing. But all it really is just shifts in beliefs. And that's what sometimes drives us to domesticate or condition someone. And we're punishing them. We're punishing them for staying silent. We're punishing them for saying you're either with us or against us, or you're punishing them for not living up to this ideal state. So that's what conditioning is. That's what domestication is. I need you to believe in this because for as long as this is agreed upon, I know who I am. I know where I stand. I know how to survive in this. I know how to live in this. I know how to accept myself. I know I'm worthy. I know that I am righteous under this. And if you tell me that was only there because we agreed it, and at any given moment it ceases to exist, who am I? And there's the biggest fear of who am I without this belief? And people will go to war to this. But ultimately, it was never the truth. So from that point of view, it's like AI will do its thing. The sun will do its thing. But we humans have a choice. We can continue to believe in everything that separates us from ourselves, let alone other people. Because when we look at ourselves in the mirror and we reject ourselves there, those are just beliefs that are only there because we agree with it. And the moment we realize that they're only there because we agree with it and we decide to let it go, it's like letting go of a weight that was bothering me and judging me and not letting me live my life authentically. It's something because I never let me see it. From that point of view, my life will change dramatically. It'll shift in a way that I can never even begin to imagine, because all of a sudden I'm accepting myself for the very first time. And the best way to let go of conditional love, which is what this is to forgive myself for ever saying yes to it. And I can forgive others because they have no idea. Forgive me, Father, they do not know what they do. One of my favorite, if not my favorite teaching of Christ. From that point of view, I can let go of all the things that make me reject myself and allows me to reject others and allows me to find that common ground that allows us to be in peace with one another. As a species, as humans, this is the thing that divides us. What do we fear AI having? It gets contagious, or it gets exposed to that. That all of a sudden I can't let it change. It needs to stay where I want it because this is what I do. This is what I am. This is who I am. This is where interest comes in. Sometimes interest gets distorted, not because something we need as a whole, as a community, but what do I need in order to satisfy my conditioned belief system?
Yes, and there are plenty of people out there who are well unaware of what you're talking about, and if they were to get the power of AI, and they would use it just to fulfill their belief system. And their belief system for many is, I want to be the most powerful, richest, or whatever they're after. And but that's Yes, all that is true. And that as you're speaking, it reminds me a lot about some of the times I've eaten hallucinogenic mushrooms. And I don't want to make this about drugs. I hate that term because everybody listening, hey, Vicodin is a drug. Opiates are drugs. And I don't know if any of you have known anyone who got addicted to opiates. Caffeine's a drug. It doesn't really turn out so well, as opposed to somebody that maybe ate some mushrooms and sat under a tree and looked at the stars. Man, fabulous things occur. So to call them the same name bugs the shit out of me.
Yeah.
So I like to say plant medicine, kind of hippie sounding, but one of the things that consistently occurs, not just for me, but for all of my friends that you talk to, you eat these things and you look in a mirror and man, that domestication's gone.
Yep.
And when it first starts coming on, it's scary as shit. You can feel it melting away. The things you identify with. I'm an entrepreneur. I am an artist. I am funny. I am, and it's just layer by layer, it's falling away. It's like, and people will sometimes say it feels like you're dying. And I guess your ego is dying. And then later on in the trip, what happens? You have this moment of clarity, which is the clarity of truth. And when you look into that mirror, you just see the truth. You just see you, just this empty vessel of awareness, like you were when you were a little baby. And then you look around, you don't look in the mirror, and everything around you is so beautiful. The most simple, stupid thing is amazing and fascinating. Life is full of fascination and beauty all around you. And that is a very fast track way to have at least that experience to be able to feel what it feels like and to remind yourself. Every time I've done mushrooms, I felt like I had a moment where I felt like I was a baby. Like I'm just a little baby. It brings you right back to the source. Now, of course, the trip wears off. You go back to work. There's traffic on the freeway. You and your wife aren't getting along. All these things come back. But just to have touched it, and I've touched it many times, makes it a lot easier for me in those moments to just quickly remind myself, no. Everything's perfect just as it is. One of the things I like to say to myself when the matote, is that what it's called? Which is the confusion of life, the noise of life, your mind, it's talking, you should do this, you're less than, you're good, you're not, you're bad. All the matote is happening is I like to visualize myself as just a point of awareness. Like if the whole universe is God, Aaron is just one, like a nerve ending in God's pinky. It's one place to look back at myself. So that's what, and so, to die is irrelevant. You just merge back into the whole. So, it just makes getting through the matote a bit easier for me. And I know there's a lot of techniques in your books talk all about these techniques, but that's just something that I thought I'd bring up because as you were speaking, it reminded me so much of what hallucinogenic plant medicines have done. And you see a big revival happening in that, and especially from Mexico with all in South America with all the ayahuasca and everything. But I know a lot of people have done these things and I've never seen anybody come out fully enlightened. They have that moment and then the old habits come back in.
Yeah, of course.
And this is when the practice of the warrior takes place, where you can really start, another thing I do is questioning, I think this, and just always pausing and being like, do I?
Yeah.
Who told me that? And sometimes it's simple shit. Like I heard it on the news or my neighbor, or sometimes it's more powerful. No, my father taught me this. Maybe I should stick with this one, but just questioning it all. Where is this opinion actually coming from? Do you really give a shit or were you programmed to give a shit? And it's just this practice that you do, and you can slowly start becoming closer to the truth of it all and let go of that domestication. And I believe more fulfillment, more happiness pours into that void.
You just describe losing the human form. This is how I know it. This is the term that I know. Like in my life, I've experienced that. I didn't do it with hallucinogenic. Sorry, my accent sometimes gets in the way. It was breath work. And
which can cause this thing,
yes. And then I also did it with in Teotihuacan in a power journey at the top of the pyramid of the sun. I totally got into the ceremony. All of a sudden, like I woke up and I saw everything as is, and it was the most beautiful, just the way you described it. I had that experience. That's when my father says Now go back and face death by becoming alive. You have those moments. We sometimes call it a moment of clarity. But it's just, it doesn't even begin to describe also what it really is, which is losing the human form, which is all of a sudden you see life without that filter of my identity, by which the model by which I domesticate myself, but who I am or I need to know. I just simply am present and get to see life as is, and not let a filter distort it. Just see it. And you stay there and you feel such peace. You can even feel and have a communion with a plant. Also, I still remember that day where I'm sitting there in the porch after I come back from Taylor. I'm still remembering, because you're right about you forget. And I'm sitting there and I'm sitting next to a plant that all of a sudden I feel like it's in pain. And I'm looking at it, I feel pain, and I just get up and I look, and it has this little rope that tied it, and someone did that so that we can see the view of the valley. We're in Descanso, California at the time. And I felt it like, oh, you need me to untie this. And I untie it, and I felt the relief. Communication, it wasn't language. Some people say it's the interaction of intuition, which has nothing to do with the brain. The mind. Sorry, I meant to say that. Intuition is perceiving life as is. We all have it. It's that sensation when someone's looking at you, and you also look up because you have that sensation. Is the deer that hears something, and you know it. But like the saying, actions speak louder than words. Well, we use words to describe every action. The moment it stops being intuition is the moment we start giving it a story. We start giving it a name, and we start giving it a story of fear or love or whatever it is. At that moment, we begin to process it. It stops being intuition. It starts being the mind, the process. And that's how we start slowly forgetting how you described it, because I experienced that too. I remember having that moment of clarity. I remember walking as if I was stoned, but I had not done any drugs. I had done nothing. I was just walking around, feeling this body as like if I was a newborn, and just, playing a game with two people playing ping pong, and I can feel their desire to win and competitiveness, and that didn't make it fun. And at that moment, I just walked away. I remember walking around, and then slowly it comes in, like fear comes in, jealousy comes in, all that old programming. So from that point of view, going back to what we were talking about at the beginning of the show, the need why Tezcatlipoca gives itself the name Tezcatlipoca in order to remember. You can almost say, my father...
No, just to reiterate, Tezcatlipoca was the young man who looked into the reflection at the base of inside the pyramid, saw himself and the stars behind him reflecting into it, had this moment of enlightenment or whatever we're describing right now, awareness, went back into the real world. And because the smoky, now the mirror has become smoky, he's not seeing it. Others he's trying to explain it to are not hearing him or seeing it. So he changed his name to remind himself that most of the time you're walking around with smoky mirrors all around you.
Yeah. A tradition we call controlled folly comes in. It's like where we start aware, like, it's like you take off the mask by which you condition your domesticate yourself. That which we were talking about before, like we were taught, with Gen X, we're taught this, that. Who taught us this? Whoever we learned it, kind of doesn't matter, because at that moment when you take it off, none of it matters, because all that matters is what you see. Then you realize that as you engage the world, everyone's projecting a mask onto you. Everyone's projecting, and your temptation will be to believe it. Of course, this is now, you can say the 40 days in the desert that Jesus went through. This is the 40 years in the desert that Moses went through, and all that kind of thing. It's in our tradition, it's basically called controlled folly, where all of a sudden we have a moment of awareness and staying in our awareness, because we don't live isolated in a monastery. We don't live isolated in the hill. We're part of a community. And for as long as we belong in a community, we're going to be engaging it. So we're going to be engaging people who are in different stages of their attachments or their awareness, whichever word you want to use. And some people will be so attached to their beliefs, some fanatical, some people will be detached, level 1 authenticity, or level 3 identity, or 4. I'm talking about the levels of attachment here. And we're describing something about how we engage. Your temptation will be to let that domestication come in, but you're already starting to feel ourselves slowly begin to forget. And we start believing it, believing, and little by little, there we are again. We're back at that. So it's something that control folly is about being able to stay in our awareness as we begin to engage. So in Teotihuacan, there's each plaza has a little island. Some doesn't have those islands because it's not meant to be used in that way. But in the island of temptation, which is the very first plaza after Quetzalcoatl, sorry, the plaza of Quetzalcoatl represents hell. The very first plaza after that, when you let go of that attachment and you begin your journey in that respect, is the island of the temptation, which is also the island of the mind. It's an exact replica to the plaza of Quetzalcoatl because for as long as we live, we're going to use our mind. Reminds me of the old stories because I went to Catholic school. I grew up Catholic. I still consider myself Catholic, but not that kind of Catholic. But I still remember the lessons. When I went to catechism, there was a story of how in my catechism, they taught us that one cannot hear the voice of God because if you hear the voice of God, you will explode. I'm a kid. They use the word explode in the explotar. Whenever you hear the voice of God in the Bible, it is through a channel, a medium, an angel called a seraphim. A seraphim represents an angel that speaks in the frequency that human can understand by which God talks to human. This is something I've learned. All right. That seraphim is the mind in our tradition. Mm-hmm. It's basically that vessel by which we interact. The mind becomes the active domesticator. Once we have our domesticators who domesticate us, it is our mind that continues to domesticate us because we continue to believe in those ideas.
Domesticate at that point.
Yeah, I'm going back to the truth versus belief. A belief that only exists for as long as we believe it. Those beliefs become our filter and begin to distort things. So for as long as we believe it, there will be the truth. So the seraphim in the Plaza of Quetzalcoatl is a demon that is our active domesticator that subjugates our will because our belief system controls it. My grandma, during my apprenticeship with her, would always ask, do you control knowledge or does knowledge control you? And she would change it. Is the bottle drinking you or you drinking the bottle? She would always shift it according to what we needed. And definitely heard that one too. But we get to the point where we become aware of our active domesticator. Yes, someone in our life domesticated us, but we've continued to believe in those beliefs and we begin to unravel. Then we go into the plaza of temptation, the plaza of the mind, which is the very first plaza in the Avenue of the Dead. In that basically is for as long as you are in this human body, you will speak mind to mind with every person you engage. Right now, I'm speaking mind to mind and I'm using English as a vessel that allows us to understand. And through our conversation, we found a common ground that allows us to understand each other because we have a desire to understand. But in that inner dialogue within me, when I first came out of the Plaza of Quetzalcoatl, even though I had, can say, let go, it's still acting like a demon because that's what I've known. That's what I've been used to. So from there, each plaza after, the plaza of water, the plaza of air, the plaza of fire, the plaza of earth, that leads us to the pyramid, each one represents a different stage in our evolution of the journey. And with every step I go through in evolution, the frequency by which that angel speaks, if it first started sounding like a demon, as I do the work, it slowly shifts and cleans itself and you can say redeems itself till it becomes the ally.
Mm-hmm. I totally get that.
Yeah. So Castañeda talks about allies with the plant medicine and things like that. Well, in our tradition, the ally is the mind.
You're talking about Carlos Castañeda.
Carlos Castañeda, yes. So in our tradition,
his books blew my mind as a teenager.
Exactly. Yeah, I read two. I read two. The first two.
The Yaquai Indians.
Yes, the teachings of the Juan. Yeah. So in our tradition, imagine that seraphim being a complete demon, complete in hell. It just complete keeps us in our domestication. As it goes into each one of the plazas, you can say the mind will always stay in the plaza of the mind, of the temptation, because I will always interact with people. But in that inner journey with water, I begin to let go. The water flows and takes away. As you can say, the baptism, if we use Judeo-Christian belief stuff, it's the story of the riverman, like Jose talks about, my brother Don Jose Luis. If you pay attention to the river and you're standing in the river and you turn around, you're always paying attention to what the river took away, and you're just hoping that the river brings it back. In detaching from Quetzalcoatl, we've learned to use little stones that represents our beliefs, and we go through, like the concept of what's truth and what's a belief, and we slowly de-domesticate ourselves by putting into question the fifth agreement: be skeptical but learn to listen, which is angel training. Mm-hmm. Well, that's my brother teaches, and my dad teaches, and I teach to a certain degree. I'm doing right now, actually. And we go through the stones, and we become aware of how this stone, which is a symbol that represents that conditioned belief, that idea, that domestication, and how it corrupted us and how it impacted our relationship. And we slowly begin to work through it, and we let it go. Mm. To let it go is to forgive ourselves for ever picking it up. We detach ourselves to it, and little by little, we're deconstructing. We deconstructing until a moment I no longer need to love myself conditionally. I'm no longer afraid to know myself without my identity, without my domestication. Mm. And that takes us to the next plaza. We learn to detach in that way. But then if you go to this plaza of water, in order to detach, just put something in your hand and slowly submerge it, and the current will take it. Unfortunately, here in San Diego, we just remembered what that looks like with the floods we just had, the flash floods. But water just takes. It's ruthless. It takes away, which means instead of turning and looking at what the river took, turn around and see what the river is bringing. Mm-hmm. This is my brother Don Jose Luis Ruiz teachings here. All of a sudden, you see that life is continuously bringing you something. Mm-hmm. Because the old world no longer exists. This new world is coming in. Mm-hmm. At that moment, you submerge yourself into the water, and the river took that which no longer serves you, otherwise known as a baptism. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's the plaza of water. Right there, the frequency of the angel cleanses. Mm-hmm. The next plaza is the plaza of air. Mm-hmm. We are the infinite possibility because we're alive. And for as long as we're alive, anything is possible. All I can think is just imagine it. If I like it, I'll say yes to it. If I don't like it, I'll say no. There's an old cartoon that I love called Mafalda from Argentina. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like the Peanuts of here in the States with Charlie Brown, but with Mafalda. In it, they have a character named Felipe. Felipe is in love with this little schoolgirl, just like Charlie Brown is in love with a little redhead girl. Right. There's a strip where Felipe sees the little girl in the park. He sees her. This is his chance. She's alone, and I'm here. And he starts walking towards, all happy, and then the smile fades away, and then he slowly starts turning around, goes back, and sits down in a chair, in a stone. Sorry. He rejected himself. He did not let the girl give her a chance to say yes or no. She has every right to say no, but he was so afraid of the no that he didn't even give her a chance to say no, because he said no for her. Mm-hmm. Imagine doing that with applying for a job, applying for college, applying for something. This is where our domestication stops us, because we're afraid of rejection so much. Because if we're rejected, what does that say about me? Who does that say? And all of a sudden, we're not being our infinite possibility, because we're letting our belief system, especially our sense of self-doubt, our insecurities, stop us from living a whole life. And we're holding on to what we know because that's what we know. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, we're no longer living our free will. We're staying in a place we're comfortable because we're so afraid of the unknown that we'll stay in a place that's so uncomfortable and painful. Mm-hmm. But at least we know it. Mm-hmm. And we can say that a lot of people live here. This is where a lot of wars happen. This is why we domesticate, because how dare you change the definition of what a man or a woman is? Or like, why are you changing it? What is this transgender thing? And you can see the fear coming in and stopping someone else from living their authentic selves and letting them be happy in their own life, in their own skin. If you become aware that we have these beliefs that are limiting our possessions, then similar to what we did in the Plaza of Quetzalcoatl and the Plaza of Water, we're able to let go by forgiving ourselves for ever believing it. Mm-hmm. It was just a belief. The truth didn't stop us, even though the truth is life has every right to say no to us. Mm-hmm. Life has every right to say no to us, just like the young girl in the cartoon or anyone we've ever asked. When I was young, I was afraid to ask someone out because I was afraid of the rejection. And I was rejecting myself. I was using her truth because here's the thing. If I go up to her and ask her out, if she says no, she's telling me her truth. I'm not that into you. Like they say in Sex and the City, you know, like Berger tells Miranda, Sex and the City, I'm just not that into you. Or however that's been said in that show. That person said their truth. What we do with that truth is what matters. If we're already insecure and she says no to us, well, of course, why would she even like me? I'm hideous, I'm this, I'm that. And we're already rejecting ourselves. We're using their truth to reinforce whatever doubt we have or insecurity we have, condition we have. And in the case of the little cartoon of Felipe, he didn't even give her the chance to say no. He rejected himself already. And the plaza of air is about being as free as the air and letting go of all those things that limit us, that stops us. And that in of itself is a journey. But once we cross that, the frequency of the serpent changes again. Because all of a sudden, I'm not afraid to change. I'm not afraid to transition. I'm not afraid
of the truth.
And I'm not afraid for my relationship to change, which leads us to fire. And this is where all the landmines are, all our emotional wounds. I call them landmines because when you hit a trigger, we explode. But it's about our relationship with this body. Everything that makes us ashamed and guilt of being a man or a woman or whatever, everything in between. What makes us feel guilty about pleasure. Of our sensuality, not sexuality, senses, because sometimes we're just simply too ashamed to feel a sensation in our body because we're so domesticated. So it's all about coming into terms and healing the relationship within ourselves. And that one, we can spend decades or years or even just a day. But it depends on how much trauma we're healing with our relationship with this body and our belief of what is to be a man, what is to be a woman, or what it is to be conditioned, because sometimes our domestication was there so that our parents, they don't want us to, get pregnant or contract something, or what are they going to say, social status and things like that. We're 8 billion people with different cultures. It's going to be different throughout the cultures, but ultimately it's about healing the relationship within ourselves. Once we begin to heal that relationship within ourselves and we're accepting this is my body, regardless of whether I call it a man or a woman, it doesn't matter. What matters is this, because yes, someone domesticated us to what it is to be a man or woman. In fact, we start being domesticated the moment our parents find out a boy or a girl is coming. If it's a girl, it's pink. If it's a boy, it's blue. Mind you, 100 years ago, boys had pink. And the pink was associated with boys. Somewhere after the Victorian age, it shifted and changed, and it's something. It's continuously changing. We're talking about this again
because those are just agreements.
Those are just agreements. Those are just beliefs.
Boys aren't blue and girls aren't pink.
Yeah, exactly.
That is an agreement made currently in culture, just to highlight your point.
Yeah, exactly. It's like it's not the truth; it's a belief. Going back to that, knowing the difference.
Right.
The next one is the plaza of Earth, and that's our relationship with humanity, with planets, our life, with the species that live in this planet, in our place in it, and how we heal that relationship itself. I am an animal, but not, like it was once one part of the upbringing is like we're not animals, we're something above it. No, we are members of this family that is life in this planet Earth. And, we go through that process that takes us to the pyramid of the moon, where we begin to heal. And that's when the Toltec is born. I am an artist, and the canvas for my work of art is my life.
I like that line. I like that.
So from that point of view, regardless of how high I go in that journey, the mind stays in that plaza of temptation, because for as long as I have my mind, I'm going to be interacting with people all around me. But the frequency by which that mind, that seraphim, If it once was the demon, as we go through the journey, it becomes the ally, the angel that we describe, we've gotten to know. All of a sudden, I become the constant opportunity for unconditional love in every relationship that I am in, including myself. And that takes us to the pyramid of the sun, because from that point of view, we have that mastery of ourselves. In our tradition, to become a master, it means we put something into practice. It's like reading a cookbook. If you read the cookbook and you never apply the recipe, you'll never know what that meal will taste like. The only way to know is if you follow each and every step. And if you succeed the first time, great. If you don't succeed the first time, great. At least you put into practice. And the more you practice it, the more you get more confidence in yourself to do this. I can do this. That's what confidence does with practice. Eventually, that confidence turns into trust. And that usually is the moment I don't crack open that recipe book to make that meal, because I know that recipe. It's like in yoga, the moment you no longer look up to see what the yogi is doing, because you know what you're doing, and all of a sudden you're actually doing the movements. And then it takes us to faith. Trust, confidence leads to trust. Trust leads to faith. When I have 100%, without a doubt, I can do this. In cooking, you can make, all of a sudden you move from Sacramento, California to move to Reno. That's what I did. And all of a sudden the recipe I made changes because the altitude just changed. And all of a sudden what boils at a different, it takes longer. So you adapt. If you don't have any trust, you're going to fall apart. But that moment's when you become aware that you were cooking with two ingredients that you didn't think you were: time and altitude. And you adapt. And in that adapting, you have complete faith in yourself, because I know I can do it even when things change. It is, for example, in yoga, it is the moment you finally breathe with the movements. When the brain is no longer trying to get the right movement, it's no longer caring about how you move, you're actually breathing. And all of a sudden, you're doing yoga for the very first time in your life. You're letting breath flow with the movement. And all of a sudden, you have a communion with yourself.
And so everyone listening, that is the retreat you lead. Those were actual physical locations in
Teotihuacan, yes.
Teotihuacan. I'm going to finally get that, I swear, one day. And so in the retreat, do you spend like one day at each location, or is it all happening there's a whole process?
It all depends, because time is different. Like nowadays, you can't climb the pyramids anymore. Like it's and for good things, like they need to be protected. But it's shifted, because like there were times where with my father, for example, is that sometimes he would stay the whole 3 days or 4 days in one plaza. Sometimes, but with us, we start in Quetzalcoatl, and then depending on where the group is, we spend however long in whichever plaza.
Okay.
Sometimes we do it little by little. Sometimes we stay in one. Sometimes we don't even do the plazas. We go to Titla. And then we always finish in the sun, which nowadays we can't climb the Pyramid of the Sun anymore, ever since the certain situation that happened in 2020 happened. Things kind of shut down a little bit.
The germ moved around.
Yes, the germ moved around. But in my point of view, it's a good thing, because you needed to protect the pyramids from erosion, because a lot of people climbing it, things get eroded. So it's a good way to protect it. Will they ever open it? We'll know. But here's the thing. How we teach it doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to climb it. We do the work. We can do the work anywhere. That's the concept of mastery of life. It's about reaching that faith that my grandmother had. And that's basically teaching what my father taught me through Teotihuacan in order to reach my grandmother's faith. Because that's what she taught me. Those are my two teachers in my life.
It's beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful way to describe it. It really resonates with me. It reflects and echoes so many other philosophies I've read, from Buddhism to Hinduism. You can find this process in each one described differently.
Exactly.
Which to me kind of leads to, maybe we're looking at some truth here. But I like how that's put. You start, just to review, you start at the temple of Quetzalcoatl, which is hell. And what I would say to that is hell is when you don't understand that the agreements in your mind are simply agreements and they aren't the truth. And I like to use practical examples. Imagine you were born as a boy, you grow up to be a man who's 4'8". Well, in my generation, there's going to be a lot of programming on that child. And I don't know how it happens from one kid in class. Maybe it happens from his father. It doesn't matter. One way or the other, he's probably going to hear the message, you're a little pussy, or you're never going to be, no woman is ever going to, the good looking girls are, you're never going to crush it in business. Everybody knows that a man that's like, so all the agreements are made. And if this young man doesn't become aware of those agreements, he will live in hell. He'll be in the temple of Quetzalcoatl his whole life. And a lot of times you'll even see that. They call it the short man's attitude. You'll see the little guy in the room and he's hyper defensive and will fight anyone at the drop of a hat. And you're like, oh, he's still dealing with these agreements that he made as a child. And in order to defend himself, because he believes that this is the way he is, he's going to do all these odd behaviors. And then you'll meet a guy that's, you can tell is, he was short. He probably went through that same process. He's totally at peace, confident. Has probably got a beautiful girlfriend. You can tell he confronted that agreement and said, that's not truth. That's simply what culture told me, but I am not that. I am just simply me, and I can be anything. So there you are. There's hell, the agreements we make. Then you get yourself up to the next temple, which was what was the next one?
Plaza of the Mind.
Of the mind. And this is the metote. This is all the people around, some of them, the mirror is clear. Most of them, the mirror is pretty foggy. And so you're having all these people who are in the metote, in that same confusion, in that same struggling with these agreements that aren't truth, but they agreed to them. And so that's the metote. And you start recognizing it as the metote. And then once you recognize it, you go into the plaza of water, where you can submerge yourself in the water with this new awareness, and you can shed away these agreements. And you can have the courage to do so by the example you gave of a river takes away, but the river also brings in. So there you are, washing away what you didn't need and becoming closer to who you really are, your true identity. With this new development, we then move into the plaza of air. This is the space where we start to recognize the unlimited possibilities of the true, authentic you. Without the anchors and baggage of the agreements of the domestication that we were given. With this new power, we now move into the plaza of the moon, where we are now reborn. Which is actually funny to say because we're actually returning to our original selves, not even a rebirth. It's kind of like going back to what you started with as a baby. And so, but in our way, it's a shedding and a rebirth. With this new rebirth, we move into the temple of the sun, where we put this artist of our lives. We put these new, without the bags, we put it into action. This is the moment of action to take this and make our life the message we leave behind. Not our words, but our actions, what we did with it, the risks we took, the risks we didn't take, the things we created, the things we said yes to, the things we said no to. This all is the biggest message we can send out. This is our canvas. This is the painting that remains when we're gone. So I get that right?
Yeah, you got it right. There's two plazas, like the Plaza of Fire, which is passion, and the earth. But ultimately, going back to before this, the relationship with AI, going back to that, your relationship with the AI will be different according to which plaza you're in. But that's also going to be true with every person you ever meet. Your relationship with that person is going to be depending on where state or which level of your awareness you are.
Absolutely.
So if you see AI from the point of view Quetzalcoatl, then you'll see Terminator and that kind of Skynet. That's from the movie. But then again, you'll see that in every single human being. Everyone has something they want, and you'll mistrust them because, well, you're not trusting yourself. Whatever. It's just you're projecting. But as you go the journey, it's different. It doesn't make you. You're not a doormat, but you're more like respectful. You're more, you can say, aware of your environment. You're aware of the relationship you're in, and realize that every relationship is just different, because the person you're in a relationship with is different from the person next to that person. And I'm different because this person brings out a totally different element. And then at the same time, we're both changing with every moment of life.
Well said. Yeah, and you're right. AI, we keep using that as a way to kind of articulate dealing with a new emergence, you can say, which can be perceived as a threat or it can be perceived as a savior. I guess the only issue I have with it is there's a lot of people walking around with some smoky ass mirrors.
Yes.
And some of them are going to be in charge of this shit, which, I can't help but get a little like, whoa. But I do also believe that everything is perfect. I think the universe has created somehow organized this whole existence, reality, in a way that we're all getting served exactly what we need at every moment, given the opportunities we all need at any moment. Yeah. And I also have a firm belief that there is existence beyond death. So,
me too.
So come what may. I'm good. Let's go is kind of where I end up, really. But I do like to anchor myself in hopeful thoughts.
Yes.
I do see an emergence of a powerful tool that could really bring a lot of good to our planet. We named earlier a lot of the beautiful things it can do. It'll probably end up doing a little bit of both. We'll probably have that ebb and flow at first, but hopefully in time, with this new generation of youngsters I see coming up, I see a bright future with these young people. They're different than us in a lot of ways, but difference is good. The world is changing, and we're going to need different people to run it. So with that, I see hope, and I encourage everybody listening right now to really embrace these young people that are coming up right now, and their differences and their fluidity with the way they identify themselves and the way they want to live their lives. Let's embrace this. Every generation has to change, especially now because we have such quick and paramount change occurring on the planet. Like that. So that's why we're seeing such a quick change in our youth. I mean, they're just jumping leaps and bounds into new paradigms right before our eyes, bringing up concepts and ideas and making a lot of the old people really uncomfortable. But realize they're going to need to do this because the world is changing that rapidly currently. I mean, the Industrial Revolution was a big change, but it took numbers of years, decades. This change we're dealing with now is 1-2 years, 3 years type shit. So I think it's important for us older folks. I'll call myself an older folk.
We're Gen X. We're the last generation that remembers those analog years.
Yeah, true.
But at the same time, we're also the generation that learned how to engage it. I still remember. I remember when we're looking at schools. I went to a school and they invited us to be part of their parent meeting type of thing, and they were all afraid of social media. And I remember saying to them, why don't you guys join social media and find you'll be able to find your old friends. You'll be able to find your old elementary school friends, your old high school friends. And they're all like in shock and awe, going, do I really want that? And now look at us. It's our thing. But we adapt. That's if something as a human species that we adapt. It's the longer we hold on to an institution or a philosophy that no longer serves us, the longer it's going to take us for something to move on to something that will. But that's the beautiful thing about these next generations, is that they live in a world that's fluid. And at the same time, like I just saw a little video of a teacher says, how you're teaching the new generation with alpha, I guess it's alpha something. The teacher usually gets mommy once in a while. Previous generations have reached mommy. This year that she first heard Siri. She was called Siri.
Yeah, so that's the new parental figure, possibly for them when they're young. It's
true.
Siri.
But it's actually also a very impressive thing, because usually when you ask Siri, you're asking it a question, which also means, yes, you might be seeing Siri as it might be the parental figure, but it could also be the portal, like, Siri, how do you say this? Hey Siri, why is that? Why is that? And you actually, kids like to ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they found someone who actually answered them without getting tired.
Yeah.
To answer those questions. That's one of the things we parents, we eventually get tired of answering, but why, but why, but why, but why? Hey Siri, but why? Hey Siri, but why? Hey Siri, but why? Siri won't get tired.
That's Siri. Now you get into AI.
Mm-hmm.
An honestly built AI has the knowledge of all mankind. Every book ever written, every poem ever written, every culture's beginning, demise, destruction, the history of the universe, and every bit of knowledge mankind has collected is in one, and you can ask it a question.
Yeah. And that's the thing. What we're seeing now is the same thing that happened with Gutenberg when the press was invented. All of a sudden, when the press was invented, knowledge was more available to a wider group of people, whereas before it was just to a very select few, because very few people could afford those books or those codices that was protected. But once you found a way to copy knowledge that way, a lot of misinformation began to show, because all some people believed what was in print, and it took several decades, if not centuries, to learn how to read a newspaper with scrutiny and not believe it right off the bat. We have, since Gutenberg, we have the invention of the internet, where all of a sudden the knowledge of the world, just that you described it, was in our fingertips, and voila, misinformation started happening again. It's one of those things that we want to, in a time where all our beliefs have the possibility of being put into question and be dismissed as untrue. Sometimes that's when we hold on tighter, because we don't want it to change. Going back to that conversation, we don't want it to change. And that's why sometimes misinformation or fake news exists. It's there to protect the attached beliefs of an individual. I want to go into it. That's, sometimes a conspiracy theorist only goes down the rabbit hole only because they want to get the reaffirmed story I want to already believe. Yeah. Whereas a skeptic does something different. They don't go down the rabbit hole. It ends about 2 or 3 questions.
Or they go down the rabbit hole and they stay skeptical throughout.
Yeah, exactly.
I do a lot of that, where I go down those rabbit holes and I just want to see what these other people are reading.
Yeah, exactly.
But I'm like, I don't know if that's true. Yeah. I just know that that's on my phone.
Exactly. So now AI has opened up a new frontier.
It really has.
And it's going to be the user that's how am I going to use it? And which, to tell you the truth, has always been the user who's been corrupting the newspaper to the internet.
Yep.
Interest, and there we go, full circle.
It does feel like a very full circle moment in history, and I'm happy to be here. I think about being a soul and maybe even having the option to choose when to be born into physical existence. I don't know if I chose or not, but I like the idea. I like to play with it that I did. And I'm like, man, I picked a killer time to do it.
Oh, yeah. It's been an interesting time. Yes. Biblical times.
It is. It's like, and like you said, we got to do the analog, our generation, all the way to Space Invaders, So I'm like, sci-fi, from analog to sci-fi in one lifespan. I mean, knock on wood, I'll get a few more years. But we are in a very interesting time. I'm loving it. I think it's filled with hope. I think your analogy of what the work of the Toltecs really shows is about that. It's about really getting clear what you're attached to, because as long as you can figure out your attachments, how they were given to you, decide if they are your actual beliefs or not. Say yes to the ones that serve you, say no to the ones that don't. Get closer to your truth. And in that moment, you'll have a more clear voice of intuition, the seraphim, which is intuition, which you could call the voice of God. I mean, it's the voice of truth. It's what comes through you when you're quiet and clear of attachment and just open. The closer we can work with these principles, I think the better AI in the future will be. So the work you're doing, I want to thank you. I think it's fantastic. I think it's more relevant and more important today than it ever has been. I think it'll be even more relevant and more important tomorrow than it is today.
Thank you.
And it fills my heart with joy knowing there's people out there like yourself and your friends and your family that are taking the time to really give back to humanity in a very big way. I mean, you could have spent this last 20 years making a bunch of money. And I'm not to say you haven't made some money, but You could have made it about the money.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's some part of you that is hugely compassionate and empathetic. And I know why, because you look out there and you see you.
Yeah.
And you see your family. Everyone is one. This planet is our mother. We all have to live on her together.
Yeah.
She's caring for us. She's loving us. When you start to come to these realizations, there's really only one path, and that is to heal, help out, collaborate, cooperate.
Yep.
So it warms my heart to know there's folks out there like yourself, and I just want to use this platform to share that with others. So thank you so much.
you.
And anybody out there listening, please check out his father's work. For Agreements is a great place to start. But if you want to jump right into what we talked about today, it's the why am I reading it wrong? The Mastery of Life, your latest book. Excellent book. It'll go through everything we just talked about today. And of course, there'll be more retreats. I don't know when your next one is. Do you know?
In May.
In May.
Yeah,
Coming
May.
up.
Yeah.
Okay. There you go. Maybe a nice time to go down and see these historical landmarks and come home a different person.
Yep.
You know, May. I got to get those dates from you because I got to look into my May. I think I want to come down to that.
Yes, Memorial Day weekend.
Memorial Day weekend. All right. I'm going to write that down. Again, thank you for coming in, Miguel. And thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you guys for all the I got to say, man, all the direct messages in the comments I've been getting is really kept me going. I mean, there's been many times where I've got a lot of other shit to do. And I think, do I really need to load more on my plate? But it's that encouragement you guys have been giving me that keeps me here. And whenever I get in this room with somebody like yourself, I'm just like, I love this. I got to do this as much as I can. So I just want to thank you all for doing that. The shares, the likes, the comments really keep this show alive. I'm a young show, a year out, growing steadily, but I still need that level of support. So I'm asking you to do that for me and thanking you for all that have. So that's it for today, my friends. We'll see you on the next one. Peace out.